Beautiful like a fresco and fascinating for its idiosyncrasies, Street Fighter III Third Strike is a melting pot of both popular culture and fighting game design. This is the Annotated Third Strike.
Welcome to the world of Street Fighter III. Prepare for battle. Well, I got the picture. Yeah, I got the picture.
In the first episode of this video series, the subtitle for this game, Fight for the Future, is mentioned with some import. Street Fighter series developer and publisher Capcom was feeling the pinch of a shrinking international arcade scene by the time Street Fighter III New Generation was released in 1997, and interest in 2D fighting was on the wane. As a way to contest this and bring new and returning players to Third Strike, the end of the series timeline as of this video, and the game that nearly made Capcom leave the Street Fighter business altogether, classic characters like Chun-Li were lavishly reimagined, and newcomers were added that pay tribute to fighting games of all makes and models. This video series asserts that Third Strike affectionately looks back at the genre the Street Fighter franchise helped codify, as it clearly struggled with its place within it at this moment. Modern consoles and changing markets meant that it was literally fighting for the future. Makoto is that future. There are certainly unique characters in this game, both from a visual and game design standpoint, but Makoto is emblematic of Third Strike's subtitle in ways that even fascinating castmates like Urien and Oro lack. For one, her fighting style evolves the way that the series has, up to this point, looked at traditional martial arts. As noted in various supplemental material like Eternal Challenge and her backstory for this game, she trains in a system of karate called Rindokan, a Japanese word for Gentiana scabra, a midsummer and autumn blooming plant common in the US and in Japan. Fans of the game mistakenly translate the word into bellflower, but it's easy to see why given the visual similarities between the two plants. The name, incidentally, may seem unusual to Westerners, but the bellflower was used somewhat commonly as clan crests through the country's feudal era and beyond. Rindokan, though, is heavily based on real-world Kyokushin karate, the ghost of which hangs heavily over this and just about every other martial arts-based video game. The Third Strike development team mentions in a Gamist interview recently translated myspopulations.com that they wanted to make a character based on Iken Hisatsu, a Japanese fighting term that means to annihilate in one blow. The team wanted a character that was simple, direct, and powerful, and with more of a Japanese style of karate compared to the likes of Ryu and Ken, whom they think of as more of a quote American style. However, Ryu, and by extension Ken, are also influenced by Kyokushin, as we'll see in their respective episodes of this series, but in more mythic tones. Makoto doesn't shoot fireballs from her hands. She lands hard punches and decisive weighty kicks, much like in real-world bare-knuckle Kyokushin tournaments. As 3D fighting games like the Tekken series began to adapt and include true-to-life martial arts in their games, Kyokushin specifically, the way she plays in this game aligns with then-contemporary video games' increasing ability to showcase actual fighting, not simple approximations. Combined with the robust parry system, she is a potential window into a future of how close-quarters 2D fighting games could have looked post-Third Strike had Capcom the resources and wherewithal to run with those ideas. Now take her youth. Makoto is yet another very young fighter in a roster filled with them. In her official backstory found in Eternal Challenge, she grew up training in Rindokan through her father and grandfather, the owners of their dojo. When her father dies unexpectedly, the fortunes of the school take a downturn, and she takes it upon herself to enter martial arts tournaments, this one for example, to drum up some prestige and ultimately find new students. It's a simple setup, with layers of pathos. We know practically nothing of Rindokan karate as viewers and players. Like other fictional versions of Kyokushin karate in gaming and media then, we can assume that her paternal figures were the founders of the style. She, the youngest of her family, is the only one capable of taking on this challenge, as we see a timid brother and frail grandfather in her ending. For her, winning this tournament, or at least finding new people to teach, is more than potential financial stability. It's about legacy. We can certainly see that she's both skilled and dedicated, and even Ryu thinks so in her pre-Gil rival dialogue. But this may not be the path she saw for her life. No high school student possibly can. Comparing her to the rest of the young cast members, she isn't being charged with a mission from a ninja clan or testing her skills before assuming a leadership role or frivolously out to make friends. She has a very specific and personal purpose that the other youthful characters lack. She's duty-bound in a different way. Makoto's intrinsic motivation, then, is to literally fight for the future. At the very least, her ending proves her strength. In another of the more comedic endings, we see that she's perhaps too strong, rifling through a who's who list of franchise cameos listed on the right. In terms of the roster, the design team actually wanted her into the game sooner. Third Strike main planner Hidetoshi Ishizawa mentions in the same Gamist interview that they had her all but finished for Second Impact, but ran out of time to include her. Since Second Impact came only a few scant months on the heels of New Generation, you can gather how every second counted for the team. Perhaps the problem was one of their own making though, because it seems as some extra time was devoted to her to some degree. She has, after all, the most unique match intros in the game, even if they appear minor, like her hair blowing in the breeze of Dudley's car. Her visual designs, at least those that have been published, have kept relatively few dramatic changes from one iteration to the next before the team finally settled on her small frame and baggy karate gi. Many players contend that this is her father's training uniform, as is implied by Capcom's own profiles on the CFN portal. Real-life judo prodigy Ryoko Tani, whose first major title came at the age of 15, may have influenced her appearance. Though eventually retiring to a life of politics, Tani was a dominant competitor in the sport, appearing in 5 Summer Olympics and 8 World Championships. She's also not a stranger to influencing fighting game characters, as ADK's Neo Geo series World Heroes' own Ryoko character is based on her. Though you may be thinking that this is a stretch, considering that Tani is famous for her contributions to judo and not karate, Kyokushin founder Masatatsu Oyama himself was a judo savant at a young age. Grapples and chokes, though not commonly used in competitive Kyokushin tournaments, did seep into the style, as we'll also see with Makoto's moveset in a moment. The name Makoto actually translates into sincerity, or depending on the kanji used to spell it, truth. This would make it yet another reference to Kyokushin, the name that means ultimate truth. But this would be subtle if true, as the truth spelling of the noun usage of Makoto and Shin, another word that can mean truth, are synonyms. If you're wondering why I don't know the specific kanji for spelling Makoto, you're right to ponder, because nobody does. Makoto's name is traditionally spelled using hiragana text in promotional and other official Capcom material. Hiragana is phonetic, unlike the more complex kanji, which tends to be more symbolic. Kanji, though, can sometimes infer gender, and though other characters in the game like Ryu and Ibuki are often spelled with hiragana, this isn't true for all of their official material, as we'll see in Ryu's earliest appearances. While the Japanese language contains gender-specific pronouns, its largely contextual nature means they're not often used. This can come down to speech patterns and self-pronoun usage given how men and women are expected to speak differently. That means that referring to one gender or another is a matter of semantics, like simply knowing that Kenji is a name for boys while Yoko is one for girls, for example. Makoto, though, is a unisex name in Japanese, and her lack of gender-identifying kanji is likely deliberate. This is because she's characterized as a tomboy, enjoying more, quote, male pursuits like full-contact karate, and according to even the most recent CFN profiles, carpentry, though that's likely to keep her dojo from falling apart. If you've been following this video series, you'll recall another character with a unisex name and more, quote, feminine features, Remy. In fact, you could say that Makoto is the anti-Remy, a sort of warped reflection of him in more thematic ways than that of the many twin-like characters in the series like Ryu and Ken or Yun and Yang. Makoto and Remy's fighting styles, for example, are encouraging of open-handed attacks. In Remy's case, this was because of the legal ramifications of striking someone with a closed fist when Savate was founded in France. In Makoto's Kyokushin-like world, though, open-handed strikes are banned from even bare-knuckle tournaments for the damage that they can inflict on the human body, and she uses them liberally. She's also the definition of what fighting game players call a rushdown character, someone that operates best when playing with relentless, harassing offense. The best Makoto players in the world will leave caution to the wind and fight like caged animals, which is a metaphor you should keep in mind for a bit later in this episode. Remy is designed, perhaps wrong-headedly for this game, to play effectively from a distance. While Makoto will overwhelm an opponent, a Remy will frustrate them from the other side of the screen. Makoto's voice actor, Makoto Tsumura, plays the character with a Tosa dialect, which would infer that the Rindokan dojo is located in south-central Japan. The dialect comes from Kochi Prefecture's former name, the Tosa Province, until the name changed during the Meiji Restoration era in the mid-1800s. Tsumoda is an active anime and video game voiceover artist, with credits from a wide range of famous work, even voicing Astro Boy for an eponymous 2003 reboot in Japan. She's voiced Makoto in all of her official game appearances through Ultra Street Fighter 4 as well. In many ways, learning to play as Makoto effectively means unlearning how most other fighting game characters work, especially in Street Fighter games. Again, she plays aggressively, steamrolling opponents and keeping them guessing as to where attacks and grapples are coming from. As such, she has one of the fastest and most distance-covering dashes in the game, but she has one of the slowest normal walking speeds of any cast member, which can be jarring to come to terms with. Her normal moveset is fairly straightforward, without any proximity moves. However, holding toward the opponent on the stick will change every button, and all of them offering a way to close the gap and gain some space. Of note is the hard punch, which can be chained up to 3 times by tapping the button. The hard kick variation will hit low, but most good Makoto players use it to sneak forward for throw opportunities. Armed with all of this, it's as if her normal walk was never meant to be used at all. The hard punch variation takes advantage of another baked-in system that Third Strike never really advertises, a definitive priority system. By this, I mean that when 2 attacks land at the same time, the game will auto-prioritize which one wins the exchange. Lighter normal attacks will lose to heavier ones, which will lose to special moves, and then EX moves, and then super arts. The sizes of hit and hurt boxes also play a factor here, but most other 2D fighting games lack an attack priority system so clearly defined. Her lower attacks have some subtle alterations to normalcy too, specifically the low hard punch, which is her sweep, and her low hard kick, which acts as an upward anti-air move. For most other characters, especially the karateka, these are reversed. She has a few target combos that offer simple, direct damage, the first being a light kick to a medium kick, and then another distance closing toward medium kick and hard kick. Like most target combos, these are nice to have, but there are better ways to both rack up damage and set up opponents for further punishment. The first is comboing into the Hayate, or Rapid Gale. This is a rushing punch performed with a quarter circle forward and a punch, the strength of the button determining only the distance traveled and not the damage output. The move has 2 very interesting variations. One is the EX version, which is both very fast and will travel the whole screen distance. It knocks down and acts as a juggle launcher for most of the cast if cornered. The second, and used with much less regularity, is that the Hayate can be chambered if the punch button is held down. The longer the button is held, the higher the incurring damage will be, up to 4 levels. Her next special is the Fukiage, which can translate into Breath Above, though Eternal Challenge omits a translation for this move, and is her variation of the Dragon Punch. It has a strange hitbox that doesn't always connect with grounded opponents, so its use is in anti-air capabilities, but it's not often seen even for this purpose in high-level play. The EX version hits harder and both will act as a launcher. The Oroshi, or Mountain Wind, is her overhead, which complements the universal one. The EX version causes a knockdown, which is good for her complex Okizeme, or wake-up game. In the air, she can use the Tsurugi, which translates into sword. It's performed with a quarter circle back and kick in the air, and the strength of the kick determines the damage. On its own, it hits once and can cause a juggle state if it connects air to air, which are all very useful traits. The EX version hits twice and causes a knockdown. The real benefit, though, can be that it alters the tempo of her air movement, making for extra time to dodge attacks or to cause tricky wake-up situations. Finally, there's the Karakusa, or elaborate pattern. This is a command grab, not unlike Q's capture and deadly blow, that leaves an opponent vulnerable for a brief moment for a follow-up attack. This is a very Kyokushin-like grapple. Just like her normal throws, tournament rules for the karate system generally outlaw holds of any kind, or limits them to under 3 seconds. As Kyokushin is a striking and not grappling martial art, the few holds that exist are used to either advance strikes or to incapacitate, which the Karakusa certainly can do. This move is integral to her overall game, with her fast dashes and point-blank attacks. Mixing things up with this technique makes her very dangerous if the opponent is constantly blocking incoming moves, especially considering the other major benefits of all of her specials. They cause substantial stun. Makoto is an absolute stun monster, which is something not easily perceived by casual observers of the game or even new players. Even without using any super meter, a strong Makoto player will adjust the tempo of her rounds to scare rivals in a Karakusa setups, making dizzy states common in matches at any skill level. This can even be altered based on the playstyle with 2 equally devastating super arts. The first, the Seichusen Godanzuki, or midline 5 level thrust, is exactly what it sounds like. 5 hard punches from sternum to jaw. While there's no forward movement on the attack, this is a common super for new Makoto players for ease of use, but is often a mainstay for clinching rounds at high level as well. With a little bit of effort and practice, players can link this move out of a short Hayate attack, which can turn quick, moderately damaging moves into an often round-ending combination maiming. If there's a downside, it's the cost of the move, as it only stocks one medium super meter. This is often used by the more straightforward Makoto players that can incur fast damage and high stun. The second, though, is far more interesting on a design level, the Abare Tosanami, or Wild Tosa Wave. This will send her to the upper back corner of the stage before diving back down for a fast combo, and the kick button used for the execution will determine the distance of the diving kick. The final hit is a Fukiyagi, which again is a launcher. This means that a highly skilled player can use this as a means of keeping an opponent in the air for both significant added damage and absurd stun potential. What's perhaps more important to note is the backward movement. While she can be hit out of it during the startup and is not completely safe, a cornered Makoto can use it as either an expensive escape tool or as a combo component. While the attack cannot be comboed from full screen, the closer that Makoto's back is to her own corner makes this super more easily connectable. All of this make Makoto, and specifically this move, one of the most dangerous in the game for two fascinating interconnected reasons. One, though very hard to master, a full combo of this move and its follow-ups will stun most of the cast, even if their dizzy meter was completely empty. With 2 stocks of the super saved, that means that the best Makoto players possess what is called in fighting game circles a touch of death combo. Often these involve her taunt, which will significantly boost her next attack. By holding the buttons down though, the taunt can have up to 3 different effects, in that a longer hold will further boost attack, and the full animation with the longest charge will increase stun recovery. 2, it means that a Makoto adept at playing Super R2 is in fact much more dangerous when cornered. As a fighting game maxim, most characters pressured into their own end zone are forced to play a more careful game as their mobility is significantly reduced. One Karakusa or even just landing a standing hard punch though will open a torrent of damage that, again in the right hands, will completely steal a round away. As if a subtle metaphor for what the Third Strike team was trying to achieve with this, perhaps the final Street Fighter game, Makoto epitomizes snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Comparing it to its 2D fighting contemporaries, this is one of the most forward-thinking design choices in a game full of borrowed and refined work from other series. Her third super, the Tandenreki, or Spirit of the Abdomen, has proven over time to be much more philosophically interesting for her character than practical for her players. Another timed super like Yon's Genei-jin, Makoto will gain roughly double the damage per hit at the expense of losing the ability to block. While she can still parry in this state, until the timer runs out, this forces a sort of all-or-nothing situation upon the Makoto player. As such, very few actual combo opportunities can happen specifically with this super as a component, but it has one unique aspect. A bug of this super leaves her completely invincible for several frames if Makoto doesn't move after the startup animation. Her neutral headbutt throw has the same curious effect. Proper use of this sort of ghost time can change the move's usage from offensive to defensive, which is generally how the few high-level Super Art 3 Makoto players that exist employ it. Because of this small meter and the high damage potential then, a counterattack-minded player can basically use this like Super R2 in that it can unload a big salvo on an otherwise domineering foe. Makoto for her part has always been popular with players. The skill needed to play her at the highest level though made her difficult enough to grok during Third Strike's early heyday that she wasn't seen in the upper echelon of the cast like Yun and Chun-Li until relatively recently. The execution necessary to properly pull it off notwithstanding, players and Third Strike scholars now consider the Touch of Death Super R2 combos more on the overpowered side compared to past high-tier characters such as Akumo, who seems to have slid a bit over the years. But we're talking about both the subjectivity of pretty good versus very good characters and the skill gap between players. So it may be reductive to place Makoto in some lofty god tier if we were to debate tiers of characters at all. Still, she's harder to use effectively than other members of the cast, whom are traditional mainstays in tournament top 8s, but Makoto, like the Street Fighter franchise, has proven resilient. Hard work with her pays big dividends, and the best players in the world will come from behind and show you how strong she is.